I'll turn it over to Alison Sander, founder of Wheels, and she's going to run this panel, and she's going to introduce our panelists.
Absolutely. So first of all, it is such an honor to be with this group. We've been up on the 6th floor, and we think you guys are getting some of the most interesting material, so you'll have to give us feedback at the end. This is a panel on cyber resilience, and I think John should get a lot of credit because many AI shows are happening. A lot of them are happening in MIT, but they don't all include two topics we have today, AI safety and cyber resilience. And I have 4 of the most amazing panelists. I want to start with 3 audience questions just before we get started. One, I'd love to see hand raising of anybody who's been affected by cyber risks so far. Is there anybody here who today has had relatives, neighbors, friends? I see at least 10 brave souls, okay, and some panelists. Now let me see a show of hands. How many people think you'll be affected by cybercrime over the next decade? So let's say it's, oh my gosh. Okay, everybody but the FBI thinks they will be handled. And then let me ask for one more question, which is how many people here are working in cyber resilience? 1, 2, 3, and our panel. Okay, 4. So I think that's a very good signal to people of where there may be opportunity in the modern world. Let me just start by introducing our 4 incredible panelists, because not only are they great resources, but they also link to some of the best books in the bookstore, and they'll probably be available later if you want to talk to them. So first of all, Dr. Carrie Pearlson is a senior lecturer and executive director of the cybersecurity at Sloan. Her research spans management information systems, business strategy, and organizational design, with a particular emphasis on building a culture of cybersecurity. And she's co-authored several books, including Managing and Using Information. From the West Coast, so this is our local ringer, from the West Coast, we have Dr. Karen Nuri, an assistant professor of cybersecurity at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey. Carrie's research focuses on international security, Karen's research and cooperation, challenges in cybersecurity, with particular attention to ransomware, cross-national regulation of the cryptocurrency sector, and international cooperation around anti-money laundering enforcement. Her work has been featured in Wired, The Washington Post, and Info Security Magazine, the hot cybersecurity journal, among many other places. Third, we have Kip Boyle, who brings over 30 years of experience in information security and risk management. He's the founder and CEO of Cyber Risk Opportunities. He served as Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, for PEMCO Insurance, and as the Director of a World Area Network Security for the U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptor program. Wow, I'm sure there's some good stories there. He's also an accomplished author, and he'll be available for book signing and answering questions on 6 between 4:30 and 5 today. And last but not least, we have Doug Doman, who's a supervisory special agent, that's SSA, I learned, at Boston's FBI Cyber Task Force. He entered duty in September 2002 at the Boston Division and was assigned as a cyber investigator, eventually becoming certified as a technically trained agent and swap operator. In 2012, a decade later, he transferred to the FBI Cyber Division in DC and was selected to oversee the Cyber Action Team, a deployable contingent of highly skilled FBI cyber investigators. Since 2016, Doug has worked computer intrusion matters, focused exclusively on ransomware and criminal cyber threats, and has good war stories about Nigeria as well as other trips. Prior to the FBI, Doug worked for Sun Microsystems, and he's offered to share openly with all of you today, but he's asked not to be recorded, so we don't want you to think it's a camera glitch when the tape for the session may be missing his powerful voice. The camera teams here are awesome. So thank you so much, and without further ado, let's get started. They've given us 21 minutes for the super rich topic, so sort of the game of today is kind of 90-second responses. I would love to have any of you who want to help the audience to understand the scale of what we're talking about. I've read statistics that say as much as $14 trillion can be the all-in cost of cybercrime, and that would make it the third largest GDP after US and China and larger than the drug trade. Well, and maybe this is a great time to ask anybody else on the panel who wants to take this. How have you seen cybercrime change in the last couple of years? How has AI changed it? How has crypto changed it? What different types of threat actors and victims are you seeing?
Well, I can share a few thoughts. So I study cybercrime, and there are a few trends that we see in recent years. One of them is professionalization or increased organization amongst the actors who carry out these crimes. So this happens in the ransomware space. We see a lot of groups that have become more organized, more sophisticated, and are going after bigger and bigger targets. We see this on dark web marketplaces that have gotten more sophisticated over time, and in other areas as well, including these compounds where, as a result of human trafficking, a lot of it in Southeast Asia, people are forced to carry out scams for many hours a day. So we see a change here in terms of the scale and the types of cybercrimes that are being carried out because of this increased organization amongst the cybercriminal actors.
And I think you described, Karen, in the phone call that when you did a deep dive on one of the organizations, how professional it was and that it was almost like being inside of a company. Can you say a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest ransomware groups called Conti, several years ago, they had many of their internal communications leaked publicly. So this showed us a lot about the structure of the organization and how they operate. So they had between 60 and 120 members that had these differentiated roles, including researchers, pen testers, and others. And they were very highly organized into teams. They even frequented legitimate job boards to find resumes for potential people to recruit to the group. So they had become very professional in a way, so somewhat like some corporations.
Perfect.
I'd like to add that. You know, we used to say that cyber criminals were going after our companies because that's where the money was or because they wanted to disrupt our business. And lots of companies think, lots of executives think they don't have to worry about cybercrime because they're not big enough or they don't have enough assets. But the truth is today, and this is where I've seen a big change, we see cyber criminals going after the vendors of larger companies or people in the supply chain, or trying to get into people in the organization that you wouldn't normally think were the decision makers as a way to sort of tunnel through to their final destination. So not to scare anybody and not to make this a paranoid audience, but I think we need to take the perspective that every organization is vulnerable today, even if you think you're not. You could be a target simply because of the people that you do business with or the people whose organizations you're part of. And we all need to think about it from that perspective so we can take the right actions.
Yeah,
I think there's one other really important aspect here that we have to acknowledge as being a facilitator of the things that have been mentioned, and that's cryptocurrency. Because until cryptocurrency emerged as a viable form of value exchange, there really was no way to do this at scale, ransomware. Most people don't know, but the first ransomware attempt was actually in the 1980s. But it failed because there was no viable way to move the ransom payments such that it was untrackable and it would actually reach the destination. And so I think we have to acknowledge the role that cryptocurrency has played.
I think that's great. And what do you guys think about whether AI is helping the criminals or the threat securers more? I mean, how is that race playing out?
But I think we all will agree that AI has raised the boat. Bad guys have as much access to it as the good guys. And so even our title talks about AI as an assister versus an enabler. We all know about deep fakes. We all know about misinformation and bias and introducing potential vulnerabilities into the data sets that we're using to train our systems, introducing vulnerabilities into the models that we're using. And the bad guys have access to all of that too. So my big fear is they're very creative and we don't know. So we don't know what we don't know. And anything we could think of, they've probably already thought of. So I think AI has just raised the boat and raised the threat level in some ways.
And I like what you said about how they're more nimble. I think we can expect to see that they'll adopt AI at a rate that will continue to outpace us. I mean, we're already outgunned right now. And AI, I don't think, has really entered the race yet. but I think it's going to be a tremendous accelerant for them. And we are going to have to find a way to keep up with it, because they're going to ultimately, I think, going to be able to attack us at machine speed. Well, we're going to have to be able to defend at machine speed. And to the extent that we can't do that, and by the way, I don't think it's possible to defend against every single attack that comes at us, that's where the resilience comes in, right? So we have to be hard to hack, which a lot of us already think about that, but we have to be fast to fix. And we need to be those two things together. And we need AI to help us do it.
Great. Well, I have a question for each panelist, and maybe we can start with Carrie, but all of you are total veterans in this field with, decades of experience. I would love to hear from each of you. What's a story or incident where you had sort of a WTF moment? Like, what on earth is happening?
Yeah, well, I guess something that surprised me recently was the Bybit hack, which happened in February of this year. And North Korean hackers, in this case, they stole $1.5 billion worth of cryptocurrency from this exchange, Bybit. They were able to launder a lot of these funds really quickly. That within 24 hours, they had laundered $160 million worth. So I think this is, on the one hand, it fits a pattern of how North Korea has been behaving for many years. But it's still pretty amazing that they're able to access these kinds of funds from the cryptocurrency sector. And it shows some real continuing weaknesses of some of the businesses, the exchanges within the sector.
Just the scale and speed is pretty extraordinary. Kip, what about you?
Well, I've had a lot of conversations with senior decision makers at different sized companies, and I guess I should first of all acknowledge that I have a WTF moment all the time. And I guess if I went too many days without a WTF moment, I'd wonder what was wrong. But I remember talking to this one chief financial officer, and I was debriefing him on the work that we'd done. They were a fruit grower, so they grew apples and blueberries and a bunch of other fruit, and brought it in from the orchards, washed it, sorted it, put it in boxes, and sent it off where it needed to go. And so I said to him, this is what we've done. And he kind of got a far away look on his face after a few minutes. And I thought, maybe I've said something that, that he didn't like. So I stopped and I asked, I said, well, what's going on? I can see that you're deep in thought in the middle of this. And he said, he goes, I just can't believe that I'm here having this conversation with you. We're just farmers. Why are we talking about cybercrime and cybersecurity? And so I said, can you put a single piece of fruit in a box and ship it to a customer without your computers? And it took him a moment, and he realized pretty quickly, though, that he couldn't. He couldn't put one piece of fruit into a delivery without their computers. So they and I think everybody is dealing with this. They've backed into a situation where they've computerized their businesses, and they can no longer operate them without their computers, but there was never an explicit decision that they made. And so I continue to encounter people who don't realize that they're tech companies that happen to do something else, and it's that tech company dependency that makes them targets.
Got it. Perfect.
Right. So I'm going to tell a story. It's a little bit more personal. When in the security panel that you had earlier today, someone talked about individual vulnerabilities, and we're all of us and our families are somewhat vulnerable. We all know the Nigerian prince isn't leaving us millions of dollars, and I'm sure everybody's seen those emails. But I'm really struck by how clever the bad guys have gotten at using that same storyline, but in different ways. And I live in an apartment building, and there's some older people in the apartment, and one of the women I ran into in the hallway one day just had this really bad look on her face, and I asked her what happened, and she said, well, I think I was just scammed out of $5,000. And then she proceeded to tell me the story about how she got an email from the Geek Squad, which wasn't obviously the Geek Squad. Maybe some of you have seen that one. And it said that they had charged her account a certain amount of money and to call if that wasn't true, and she did. And I'm sure you can imagine the whole scenario behind it. And it turns out that that scam was playing out in front of me, even though I'd read about it a million times and heard about these. In front of me was a personal victim, a friend of mine. And it her story ended up fine. We actually went upstairs to her apartment. We called her bank. They stopped the payments. That bad guy had he used, I think it was Zelle, and Zelle only lets you transfer out a certain amount of money before it stops the transaction. So the bank actually saved her. And because we were within a couple minutes of when it had happened, they were able to reverse the charges. So my friend was fine, but it struck me about how even the most, not the most vulnerable, but even the most knowledgeable people can get caught up because these bad guys are getting so much better at trying to make us believe that they are doing something or we are doing something, or they're creating urgency or they're creating anxiety, and we have to respond to it. So I think it's really important that we talk about, I tell this story also, just one more second about it. I'm the only cyber girl in my social network. My friends are normal people, not that we're not normal, but normal people that, you know, they're hairdressers and lawyers and doctors and business people. But by talking about little stories like this in front of them and telling them about things that I see in the world, I'm raising their cybersecurity preparedness. I wouldn't say awareness, I'd say preparedness, because they know these are coming and they see them. And then when they see them, sometimes they send them to me, but they're a little more resilient. And I agree with Kip 100%. You know, it's resilience. These things are going to happen, and we need to think about what we're going to do so that we can get back to normal or even better operations.
Perfect. This is so great. You've been an amazing audience, and all of our panel has agreed to be at the bookstore upstairs around 4:30 to 5 to answer other questions. And thank you guys so much. Be safe.
Yeah.